The courtroom doors swing open with an authoritative push, and the woman who enters doesn't walk, she strides. Her heels click against the old wooden floors of Providence Municipal Court with the kind of rhythm that announces arrival, not submission. She's wearing a tailored cream blazer, oversized sunglasses pushed up into perfectly blown-out hair, and carrying a handbag that probably costs more than most people in this room make in a month. The bailiff glances up. The court clerk pauses mid-keystroke. Even the handful of people waiting their turn in the gallery sit up a little straighter. This is not your typical defendant. Judge Frank Caprio looks up from the file on his bench, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and for just a moment, a single, flickering moment, his expression shifts. Not judgment. Not surprise. Just curiosity. He's seen thousands of people walk through these doors. The broke and the broken. The ashamed and the angry. The humble and the defiant. But this woman? She's something different. And Judge Caprio, after all these years, can sense a story before it even begins. "Good morning," he says warmly, his voice soft but clear, echoing gently in the modest courtroom. He removes his glasses and sets them down, folding his hands on the bench. "Please, step forward." She does. Chin up. Shoulders back. But there's something in the way she grips that purse white-knuckled, like it's anchoring her to the ground. The bailiff reads the case number aloud, and Judge Caprio scans the paper in front of him. His brow furrows slightly. He tilts his head. So he begins, looking up at her with those kind, grandfatherly eyes that have softened hardened hearts and broken down walls for decades. "Miss Ellington. Victoria Ellington. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," she says. Her voice is clipped. Practiced. The kind of tone you use in boardrooms, not courtrooms. Caprio nods slowly, tapping the edge of the file with one finger. "And you're here today because of," he pauses, reading. "Multiple parking violations. Failure to pay fines. Refusal to respond to court summons." He looks up again, and now there's a trace of confusion in his expression. "It says here you've been sent notices for over a year. 5 notices, to be exact. And you didn't respond to any of them." Victoria shifts her weight, her jaw tightening. "I was busy, Your Honor." Caprio blinks. Lets the silence hang for a moment. It's a technique he's perfected over the years, not filling the space with judgment, but with space itself, inviting the truth to step into it. "Busy," he repeats gently, not mockingly, but as if he's trying to understand. "Okay. I understand busy. But busy for a year? 5 notices?" She doesn't answer right away. Her lips press into a thin line. The courtroom is quiet except for the low hum of the ventilation system and the occasional shuffle of papers. Caprio leans forward slightly, resting his forearms on the bench. His tone softens even more. "Victoria, talk to me. What's going on? Because this," he gestures at the file. "This doesn't make sense to me. You have multiple unpaid parking tickets, all in the same neighborhood. Downtown Providence. Near the hospital. And you ignored every notice. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and when someone ignores the court like this, there's usually a reason. So I'm asking you, what's the reason?" Victoria's jaw works. Her eyes flicker toward the gallery, then back to the judge. For the first time, her composure cracks just slightly, like a hairline fracture in glass. "I told you," she says, her voice a little sharper now, defensive. "I was busy. I have a job. Responsibilities. I can't just drop everything because of a parking ticket." Caprio nods slowly, but his eyes don't leave hers. He's reading her the way a musician reads sheet music, looking for the notes beneath the notes. "What do you do for work?" he asks. "I'm a senior consultant," she says quickly. "Corporate strategy. I work with executive teams. I travel a lot. Must be demanding, Caprio says, his tone still gentle, still probing. And stressful. It is. So you were parking downtown, near Rhode Island Hospital, over and over. For work? She hesitates. Just a beat too long. Yes. Caprio watches her. He's quiet again, and the silence does its work. Her hands tighten on the purse. Your Honor, can we just? She exhales sharply, frustration bleeding into her voice. Can we just handle the fines? I'll pay them. I just want to move on. But Judge Caprio doesn't move on. He leans back in his chair, studying her with that mixture of compassion and persistence that's made him beloved by millions. Victoria, he says softly, I want to help you. But I need to understand what's really going on here. Because something tells me this isn't about parking tickets. And that's when it happens. Victoria's face flushes. Her breathing quickens. She looks down at the purse in her hands, and then suddenly, impulsively, almost violently she throws it. Not at the judge, not really, but toward the bench, toward the floor in front of it. The leather bag hits the ground with a dull thud, and the courtroom freezes. The bailiff steps forward instinctively. The clerk gasps. Judge Caprio doesn't flinch. He just watches her, his expression unreadable, as Victoria stands there trembling, her chest heaving, her eyes glistening with tears she's trying desperately not to shed. I can't do this, she whispers, her voice breaking. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. Caprio's face softens instantly. He raises a hand toward the bailiff, a silent signal, it's okay. Stand down. Then he speaks, his voice so quiet it's almost a whisper. Then don't. The courtroom holds its breath. Victoria Ellington stands in front of Judge Caprio's bench, her expensive purse lying on the floor like a discarded mask, and for the first time since she walked through those doors, she looks small. Vulnerable. Human. Judge Caprio doesn't rush her. He never does. He's learned, over decades on the bench, that people need space to find their words, especially when those words have been buried under layers of pride, fear, and shame. So he waits, his hands folded, his eyes patient and kind, as Victoria struggles to compose herself. Take your time, he says softly. There's no rush here. She wipes at her eyes quickly, almost angrily, as if she's furious at herself for showing emotion. Her voice, when it comes, is shaky but determined. I'm sorry, she says. I shouldn't have, I didn't mean to. It's okay, Caprio reassures her. We all have moments. What matters is what comes next. He pauses, then asks gently, why were you parking at the hospital, Victoria? She closes her eyes. Takes a breath. Opens them again. My father, she whispers. I was visiting my father. The courtroom seems to exhale collectively. Even the clerk, who's heard thousands of cases, looks up from her computer screen, her expression softening. Caprio nods slowly. Your father was in the hospital? Victoria corrects quietly. He's still there. Rhode Island Hospital. ICU. The judge's face changes. It's subtle, just a slight tightening around the eyes, a deepening of the lines on his forehead, but it's there. Compassion. Recognition. Pain mirrored back. I'm sorry to hear that, Caprio says, and the sincerity in his voice is unmistakable. How long has he been there? Victoria's voice is barely audible now. 14 months. The weight of those words settles over the room like snow. 14 months. More than a year of hospital visits, of ICU waiting rooms, of machines beeping and doctors speaking in careful, measured tones. 14 months, Caprio repeats softly, as if honoring the gravity of it. That's a long time. What happened to him? Victoria swallows hard. Stroke. A massive stroke. He was in a meeting. He's a CEO, he runs a pharmaceutical company, and he just collapsed. They rushed him to the hospital, and at first, the doctors thought maybe he'd recover, maybe he'd be able to come back from it. But then there were complications. Bleeding in the brain. Infections. He had to have multiple surgeries. And now her voice breaks. Now he's just there. He's alive, but he's not really present. He can't talk. He can't move. He just lies there, and I sit with him, and I talk to him, and I don't know if he even knows I'm there. Judge Caprio's eyes glisten. He doesn't hide it. He never hides his emotions in this courtroom. It's one of the reasons people love him, because he feels with them, not at them. Do you go every day? He asks gently. Every single day, Victoria says, her voice gaining strength now, as if the truth is giving her something to hold on to. After work, before work, during lunch if I can. I park wherever I can find a spot, and I run in, and I sit with him for as long as they'll let me. Sometimes it's 10 minutes. Sometimes it's 2 hours. I can't not be there. He's my dad. Caprio nods, and there's understanding in that nod. Deep, personal understanding. And your mother? He asks carefully. Victoria's face hardens. Gone. She left when I was 12. Divorced him and moved to California. We haven't spoken in years. Siblings? No. It's just me. The picture is becoming clearer now. This woman, standing in front of the bench in her tailored blazer and expensive shoes, isn't the entitled, careless person she appeared to be. She's a daughter drowning in grief, exhaustion, and responsibility, trying to hold together a life that's falling apart. Caprio leans forward again, his voice even softer now. So you were parking illegally because I couldn't afford the hospital parking, Victoria says, and there's a bitter laugh in her voice. Isn't that ridiculous? I work in corporate strategy. I make good money. But my father's medical bills, they're astronomical. His insurance doesn't cover everything. The ICU, the surgeries, the specialists, I've been paying for it. All of it. I had to take out loans. I maxed out my credit cards. I sold my condo and moved into a studio apartment. And the hospital parking? $25 a day. Sometimes I'm there for hours. It adds up. So I started parking on the street, feeding the meters when I could, but sometimes I'd lose track of time, or I wouldn't have enough quarters, or I'd just forget. Because I was sitting there with my dad, holding his hand, begging him to wake up. Her voice cracks on the last word, and she covers her face with her hands. Her shoulders shake. Judge Caprio stands up slowly. The courtroom watches, stunned, as he steps down from the bench and walks toward her. The bailiff looks uncertain. This isn't protocol, but Caprio waves him off gently. He stops a few feet from Victoria and speaks in a voice so quiet that the microphones barely pick it up. Victoria, look at me. She lowers her hands. Her face is streaked with tears. You are not ridiculous, Caprio says firmly. You are not irresponsible. You are a daughter who loves her father. And you've been carrying a burden that no one should have to carry alone. She stares at him, disbelief and relief warring in her expression. But the tickets, she begins. We'll talk about the tickets, Caprio says. But first, I want you to know something. You walked in here, and I saw someone who looked like they had it all together. But now I see the truth. And the truth is, you're breaking. And that's okay. Because sometimes we have to break before we can heal. Judge Frank Caprio stands a few feet from Victoria Ellington in the center of his courtroom, a space that has seen confessions, redemptions, breakdowns, and breakthroughs, and for a moment, they are not judge and defendant. They are two human beings sharing the weight of grief. He gestures gently toward the chair at the defendant's table. Sit down, he says softly. Please. Victoria hesitates, then moves to the chair and sinks into it as if her legs can no longer hold her. Judge Caprio returns to the bench but doesn't sit. He stands there, one hand resting on the dark wood, looking down at her with an expression that millions of people have come to recognize: compassion without pity, authority without harshness. Victoria, he begins, his voice measured and kind, I want to make sure I understand everything. You said your father's medical bills have been overwhelming? She nods, staring at her hands. Everything. His insurance covered maybe 60%. The rest? Out of pocket. And it's not just the big things, the surgeries, the ICU stay. It's the little things too. The specialists who don't take insurance. The medications. The private nurses when I couldn't be there. The physical therapists who came in to work with him even though he couldn't respond. I kept thinking, I kept hoping he'd wake up. That he'd come back. So I kept paying for everything. Anything that might help. Caprio nods slowly. And the company he runs, his company, they didn't help? Victoria's laugh is bitter, hollow. They put him on medical leave. Appointed an interim CEO. Sent flowers to the hospital. Very generous. The sarcasm drips from her words. But his salary stopped after 3 months. His benefits ran out. The board expressed their concern, but ultimately, the company had to move forward. That's what they told me, that we have to move forward. Judge Caprio's jaw tightens. He's heard stories like this before, people who gave their lives to companies, only to be discarded the moment they became inconvenient. It never gets easier to hear. And your job? He asks carefully. You said you're a senior consultant. That must be demanding, especially now. It's impossible, Victoria says quietly. I've been trying to keep up appearances. Flying to client meetings, leading strategy sessions, pretending like everything is normal. But I'm barely sleeping. I'm living on coffee and adrenaline. I've lost 15 pounds. My boss keeps asking if I'm okay, and I keep saying yes, because if I say no, if I admit I can't handle it, they'll replace me. And I need that job. I need the money. Because if I stop paying for my father's care, her voice trails off, and she shakes her head. I don't know what happens then. Caprio is quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks again, his voice is thick with emotion. Victoria, let me ask you something. And I want you to be honest with me. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Not for your father, not for your job, not to keep up appearances. For you? Victoria stares at him, her brow furrowing as if the question doesn't compute. I don't know. Do you have friends you see? Hobbies? Anything that brings you joy? She shakes her head slowly. I don't have time. Do you talk to anyone about what you're going through? A therapist? A counselor? No. Why not? Her voice rises slightly, frustration breaking through. Because I can't afford it. Because every dollar I have is going to keep my father alive. Because I don't have the luxury of falling apart, Your Honor. I have to keep going. I have to keep showing up. Because if I don't, her voice cracks, and she presses her palms against her eyes. I'm all he has. Do you understand that? I'm all he has. Judge Caprio's eyes are wet now. He doesn't wipe them. He lets Victoria see his emotion, because that's part of his gift. He doesn't just empathize, he connects. I do understand, he says quietly. I understand more than you know. He pauses, collecting himself, then continues. My own father, my dad, he worked his whole life. Came to this country with nothing. Worked in factories, in milk trucks, did whatever he had to do to provide for his family. And when he got older, when his health started to fail, I watched my mother care for him. Every single day. She gave up her own life to make sure he was comfortable, to make sure he knew he was loved. And I saw what it did to her. The exhaustion. The isolation. The way she forgot how to take care of herself because she was so focused on taking care of him. Victoria looks up at him, tears streaming down her face. And I remember thinking, Caprio continues, his voice soft and raw, that love shouldn't have to hurt this much. That devotion shouldn't have to come at the cost of your own well-being. But it does. Because that's what we do for the people we love. We sacrifice. We endure. We break ourselves into pieces if it means they might be whole. You do it one day at a time, he says. One moment at a time. And you let people help you. You don't have to carry this alone. She looks up at him, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, and for the first time since she walked into this courtroom, there's something other than defiance or desperation in her eyes. There's hope. Fragile, uncertain, but there. What about the tickets? She whispers. Judge Caprio smiles a small, sad smile. We'll get to that, he says. But first, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll take care of yourself. That you'll find someone to talk to. That you'll stop pretending you're okay when you're not. Victoria stares at him, then nods slowly. I'll try. That's all I ask, Caprio says. Now let's talk about these parking tickets. Judge Frank Caprio returns to the bench, but his demeanor has shifted. The warmth is still there, the compassion's still evident, but now there's something else, a steely determination, the look of a man who's about to do what he does best, deliver justice with mercy. He picks up the file again, flipping through the pages with deliberate slowness. Victoria sits in the defendant's chair, her hands folded in her lap, her face still flushed from crying. She looks exhausted, but also lighter somehow, as if the act of finally telling the truth has lifted a weight she didn't know she was carrying. All right, Caprio says, settling his reading glasses back on his nose. Let's look at what we have here. 5 parking tickets. Total fines amount to, he pauses, running his finger down the page. $875. With late fees and penalties, that brings us to $1,240. Victoria closes her eyes. It might as well be $1 million. Caprio looks up at her over his glasses. That's a lot of money. Yes, Your Honor, she says quietly. Especially for someone who's already drowning in medical bills. Yes. He sets the file down and leans back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. The courtroom waits. The gallery, which has been riveted by this entire exchange, leans forward almost imperceptibly. Even the bailiff, who's seen Judge Caprio dismiss hundreds of cases, looks curious about what's coming next. Victoria, Caprio begins, I'm going to be very honest with you. What you did ignoring the notices, failing to respond to the court, that's not okay. We have rules for a reason. The court sends notices because we need people to take these things seriously. If everyone ignored their tickets, the system would fall apart. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor, Victoria says, her voice steady now. I understand. And I'm sorry. I should have responded. I should have explained. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face one more thing. Caprio nods. I believe you. And I want you to know that I'm not angry with you. But I also need you to understand that actions have consequences. The city relies on parking enforcement to manage traffic, to keep the streets accessible for everyone. When people don't pay their fines, it creates problems. I know, Victoria whispers. I know. There's a long pause. Judge Caprio looks down at the file again, then back at Victoria. His expression is unreadable. But, he says slowly, I also believe that the purpose of this court isn't just to punish. It's to understand. It's to see the person behind the violation. And what I see here is a woman who's been punished enough. Victoria's breath catches. You didn't park illegally because you're reckless or entitled, Caprio continues, his voice growing stronger. You did it because you were trying to survive. Because you were trying to be there for your father in his darkest hour. Because you were sacrificing yourself, your health, your savings, your peace of mind to care for someone you love. And I'll be damned if I'm going to add to your suffering by making you pay fines you can't afford. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. The clerk looks up sharply. The bailiff's eyebrows rise. Victoria stares at the judge, her mouth slightly open, as if she can't quite believe what she's hearing. Your Honor, she begins, but Caprio raises a hand. I'm not finished, he says, and there's a hint of that signature Caprio humor in his voice now, the twinkle in his eye that's made him beloved by millions. I'm going to dismiss all 5 tickets. The fines, the penalties, all of it. Gone. Victoria gasps. Her hand flies to her mouth. But, Caprio continues, his tone becoming serious again, I'm also going to do something else. He reaches under the bench and pulls out a small business card. He holds it up so she can see it. This is the number for the hospital financial advocacy program at Rhode Island Hospital, he says. They help families navigate medical bills, negotiate with insurance companies, and find financial assistance. I want you to call them today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Can you do that? Victoria nods frantically, tears streaming down her face again. Yes. Yes, Your Honor. Good, Caprio says. He sets the card on the bench, then looks directly at her, his expression softening once more. And I want you to do something else for me. Anything, Victoria says. I want you to stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to hold it all together by yourself. You're not a machine, Victoria. You're a human being. And human beings need help. They need support. They need grace. So I want you to call that number, and I want you to find a therapist, and I want you to start taking care of yourself the way you've been taking care of your father. Because you matter too. Victoria is openly weeping now, but they're different tears, tears of relief, of gratitude, of disbelief that someone finally sees her, finally understands. Thank you, she chokes out. Thank you so much. Caprio smiles. You're welcome. Now go. Go see your father. And tell him that Judge Caprio says he raised one hell of a daughter. The courtroom breaks into applause. It's spontaneous, uncontrollable, the kind of reaction that only happens when people witness something truly extraordinary. The gallery claps, the clerk dabs at her eyes, and even the bailiff, stoic as ever, is smiling. Victoria stands, grabs her purse, and walks toward the bench. She looks up at Judge Caprio, and for a moment, it seems like she might say something else. But instead, she just places her hand over her heart and nods, a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of recognition. Caprio nods back. Take care of yourself, he says softly. I will, Victoria promises. I will. She turns and walks toward the exit, her heels clicking on the floor again, but this time the sound is different. Lighter. Less armor, more hope. As the doors close behind her, Judge Caprio sits back down at the bench. He takes off his glasses and rubs his eyes, and for just a moment, when he thinks no one is looking, he allows himself a small, tired smile. Because this right here is why he does what he does. The courtroom slowly settles after Victoria Ellington's departure, but the energy in the room hasn't fully dissipated. There's a thickness in the air, emotion, awe, gratitude that lingers like the aftermath of a storm. The people in the gallery, who came expecting routine traffic violations and mundane fines, sit in stunned silence, processing what they just witnessed. Judge Frank Caprio adjusts the papers on his bench, clearing his throat softly. He looks out at the faces before him, the next defendant waiting nervously, the observers in the back rows, the court staff who've seen him do this 1,000 times but are still moved every single time. "Let me say something," Caprio begins, his voice cutting through the quiet, gentle but commanding. "Because I think it's important. I think it's something we all need to hear." The courtroom goes completely still. That young woman who just left here, Victoria, she walked in looking like she had everything under control. Nice clothes, good job, confident demeanor. And if I had just looked at the file, if I had just seen 5 unpaid parking tickets, multiple ignored notices, I could have made a quick judgment. I could have said, "You owe the city money, pay your fines, case closed." And that would have been the end of it. He pauses, letting that sink in. But that wouldn't have been justice. That would have been bureaucracy. Because justice isn't just about following the rules, it's about understanding why the rules were broken in the first place. It's about seeing the person, not just the violation. A few people in the gallery nod. One older woman in the back dabs at her eyes with a tissue. "Victoria's father is dying," Caprio continues, his voice thick with emotion now. "He's been in the ICU for 14 months. 14 months of watching someone you love slip away. 14 months of sitting by a hospital bed, hoping for a miracle that might never come. And in the middle of all that pain, all that heartbreak, she got parking tickets. Because she was trying to be there for him. Because she was putting every dollar she had toward his care. Because she didn't have $25 for hospital parking when she was already spending thousands on medical bills." He shakes his head slowly. "And the system, our system, sent her notices. Piled on penalties. Threatened her with court. All because she parked illegally while her world was falling apart." Judge Caprio leans forward, his hands gripping the edge of the bench, his eyes scanning the room. "I've been a judge for a long time," he says. "And I've learned something important. Most people who come through these doors aren't criminals. They're not bad people. They're just people dealing with bad situations. They're struggling. They're overwhelmed. They're doing the best they can with what they have. And when we forget that, when we treat them like case numbers instead of human beings, we fail them. The system fails them. And we lose sight of what justice is really supposed to be." He straightens up, his voice growing stronger. "Justice isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about restoration. It's about helping people get back on their feet. It's about showing mercy when mercy is needed. And let me tell you something, mercy isn't weakness. Mercy is strength. Because it takes courage to look at someone's pain and say, 'I see you. I understand. And I'm going to help you.'" The courtroom is utterly silent except for the sound of his voice. "That's what we did here today," Caprio says. "We looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and we saw a daughter who's been carrying a burden that would break most people. We saw someone who's been sacrificing herself, piece by piece, to care for her father. And we said, enough. You've suffered enough. Let us take this one thing off your shoulders." He glances down at the file on his bench, then back up. "Now, some people might say I was too lenient. They might say rules are rules and fines are fines. And you know what? They're entitled to their opinion. But I'll tell you what I think. I think that if we can't find room in our hearts for compassion, if we can't recognize when someone is drowning and throw them a lifeline, then we've lost something essential. We've lost our humanity." A man in the gallery starts clapping slowly at first, then louder. Others join in. Within seconds, the entire courtroom is applauding. Judge Caprio raises his hand gently, a humble gesture, asking them to stop. "Thank you," he says softly. "But it's not about me. It's about all of us. It's about creating a society where we look out for each other. where we recognize that we're all just one crisis away from being in Victoria's shoes. One illness, one accident, one tragedy away from losing everything we've worked for. He takes a breath, composing himself. Before I call the next case, I want to leave you with one more thought. If you see someone struggling, and I mean really struggling, don't judge them. Don't assume you know their story. Ask questions. Listen. Be kind. Because you never know what battles people are fighting behind closed doors. You never know what pain they're carrying. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, a word of encouragement, a moment of understanding, a gesture of mercy can change everything. Judge Caprio picks up his glasses and puts them back on, a signal that court will resume. But before he calls the next case, he adds one final sentence, spoken so quietly that the microphones barely catch it. "We're all in this together," he says. "Let's not forget that." The bailiff calls the next defendant forward, and the machinery of the court begins to turn again. But the people in that courtroom, the ones who witnessed Judge Frank Caprio dismiss Victoria Ellington's fines, who heard him speak about mercy and humanity and the importance of seeing each other, they don't forget. They carry that moment with them when they leave. They think about it on their drive home. They tell their families about it over dinner. And somewhere across town, in a small studio apartment, Victoria Ellington sits on the edge of her bed, holding the business card Judge Caprio gave her. She stares at the number for the hospital financial advocacy program, and for the first time in 14 months, she allows herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she doesn't have to do this alone. She picks up her phone. She dials. And when the voice on the other end answers, she takes a deep breath and says, "Hi. My name is Victoria. And I need help." Because that's what Judge Caprio taught her. That asking for help isn't weakness. That breaking down isn't failure. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is admit you can't do it alone. Back in the courtroom, Judge Caprio listens to the next defendant's story, his attention fully present, his heart fully open. Because this is who he is. This is what he does. Case after case, person after person, he looks for the humanity in the chaos. He finds the story beneath the violation. He offers mercy when the world offers judgment. And in doing so, he reminds us all of something we desperately need to remember, that we are more than our mistakes. We are more than our worst moments. We are human beings, worthy of compassion, capable of redemption, deserving of grace. That's the legacy of Judge Frank Caprio. Not the dismissed fines or the waived penalties, but the lives he touches. The hearts he softens. The hope he restores. One case at a time. One person at a time. One act of mercy at a time. And it all happens in a modest municipal courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, where an 87-year-old judge with kind eyes and a generous heart continues to prove, day after day, that justice and mercy are not opposites. They're partners. And together, they can change the world.